Hey, Palmer. Hi, Garnet. You're riding right at us.
Palmer Burke is full of personality, adventurous and wise beyond his years. By the time Palmer is 14 years old, he's popular.
Go, Palmer!
An athletic teenager who dominated in crew and wrestling in the small town of Vashon Island.
He really had everything going for him.
Yet at just 14 years old, Palmer ended his own life.
Dealing with losing your child to suicide is, you blame yourself and you go back.
The emotional pain of losing her son made Kathleen Gilligan physically sick.
And I became very physically ill for 2 years, and I couldn't work for a year.
A psychological autopsy of Palmer's life brought her to this conclusion.
I've gone through everything that happened and thought, what should I have done different? And I know what I should have done different.
Kathleen says Palmer died by suicide just days after a breakup. But Kathleen says the breakdown of his life started well before that.
He probably needed professional help. I didn't recognize the signs.
April 12th.
Looking back, Kathleen says the signs of depression was there as early as 12 years old.
He was sad. I just didn't realize how sad and upset he was. And now I know that I should have, dug a little deeper, and I should have said, Palmer, are you so sad that you're feeling suicidal? And that's really what I should have done. I just didn't know. He had just turned 14.
Like most parents in that situation, she thought he was going through puberty. Suicide was never on her radar.
Parents really need to look for these subtle and not so subtle changes. I mean, even something like if a kid doesn't want to eat their dinner that night, but you have to look at the whole picture.
And the picture for those who study teen suicides is getting darker.
The data is compelling that there is an increase.
The CDC says suicide is the #2 killer among kids 10 to 14 years old. And in Washington state, the Department of Health says 65 kids under 19 died by suicide in 2016. The next year, it increased to 84.
And at this point, we can't predict who is going to die by suicide. So we don't have any tests to tell us that someone's at risk.
Dr. Molly Adrian says there's also no scientific reason on why more teens are taking their lives.
They feel like they're a burden to others, and they feel like they don't have a place in their community.
So experts say the best thing to do is to ask someone if they're suicidal. And if the answer is yes, don't try to fix it right away.
That's really hard for us adults to do, right, is to sit there and kind of be in pain with your child.
Dr. Adrian says at first, don't minimize the pain or tell someone in a crisis that time will make things better. Instead, validate their emotions.
So I think that's a powerful strategy that isn't often used.
And when it comes to suicides, experts say it's important to talk about how teenagers are doing it. Hanging and guns are the two most common methods.
I lost my son to a firearm suicide. And so this is another reason I tell his story. I had one unlocked weapon in the house.
Because suicide is an impulsive act, Kathleen says she wonders if Palmer would still be here if it wasn't so easy for him to have access to a gun.
He didn't want me to come into his room the night before, which was very unusual for him.
All the what-ifs are too late to bring Palmer back, but Kathleen is baring her soul to help other families.
I say that I won't stop telling his story until mental health and suicide prevention become dinner table conversations.
Here he goes.
That became the case for many in Vashon Island because Palmer's death rocked this small community.
A free car, too.
His friends haven't forgotten him. They walked across the stage during high school graduation with Palmer close to their hearts. In Vashon Island, Hannah Kim, Q13 News.
He had just turned 14. This is actually about 6 weeks before we lost him.
Grief has been an endurance race for Kathleen Gilligan.
One of the things he said was, there's no place for me in this world.
Kathleen believes her 14-year-old son, Palmer Burke, wrestled with the idea of calling the suicide hotline right before he killed himself.
I found on his desk the suicide hotline card, and best I can tell, he had poked 100 holes in it with the tip of his knife. And I think he sat there, tapping on it and wondering, and I don't think he called it.
Every day,
Hello, crisis line.
people working at these hotlines talk others down from taking their lives.
Are you somewhere safe right now?
A priceless human connection, but lately,
Let's try a trick to relax right now.
another form of therapy is emerging.
Our first objective is to try to provide some sort of tool and service to people who otherwise wouldn't have anything at all.
That's where mental health apps come in.
We give people suggestions for what to do, what to avoid, and strategies for how to think.
This professor of psychiatry at the University of Washington School of Medicine created Focus.
See how you feel now. If you feel more relaxed, try this again.
The professor says his app is not a replacement for face-to-face therapy, but it's a way to bridge the gap for many who may not have access to therapy and those who may be resistant to it.
We lose a good chunk of the population that we're trying to help right then and there when we ask them to come to a clinic.
So whenever needed, Focus provides virtual access to trained clinical psychologists.
They do it multiple times a day. And so there's a real difference in the frequency and the intensity of the intervention.
Focus is still in its testing stages, but there's been a surge of online resources coined as digiceuticals breaking into the market.
We're seeing a tremendous amount of millennials. We're seeing a lot of teenagers.
Co-creator David Markovich launched 18% this year, an online support group, he says, for the more than 18% of people on any given year suffering from mental illness in this country.
It's a community where people could chat with people struggling with the same struggles and inspire each other.
Markovich says they do not give out medical advice, but what they do provide is real-time support and hope 24/7. In addition to 18%, there are more mobile apps now trying to help people with depression and anxiety. And the brains behind one of them is teenage siblings Hannah and Charlie Lucas from Georgia.
It's like a security blanket, you know?
Hannah says she suffers from a chronic disease that makes her faint frequently.
I just wish that I had an app to help me instantly reach out to my friends and family.
They came up with this app called Not Okay.
The ease of having a button to press whenever you're not okay.
If you need help, pressing the panic button would send a text and GPS location to a chosen number of friends and family.
The reason why it's an app where you just press a button is that most people just text and then delete and then text and then delete.
And then it might never even get sent.
These teens say it's already helping other teens with suicidal thoughts.
This is probably one of my all-time favorite pictures of Palmer on his 7th birthday.
Gilligan wonders if an app like Not Okay could have helped her son Palmer.
Sounds like life-saving technology. I wish that had existed when Palmer was still alive.
In Vashon Island, Hannah Kim, Q13 News.
At 15, my daughter, or 15 and a half, my daughter was suicidal, and she would not go to counseling. She felt hopeless.
And as a mother, Mary Hart felt helpless.
It was really hard to get through to her because she was so depressed.
And the law was not on her side. In Washington state, the age of consent when it comes to mental health is 13 years old, meaning kids can make decisions about treatment without parental involvement. Again, Mary says her daughter refused to get professional help for her suicidal thoughts.
I was very worried, and I know I wasn't sleeping.
Desperate, this Shoreline mom took her daughter out of Washington into Oregon, where the law allows parents to put kids in treatment without their consent.
Just a huge leap of faith to drop her off there and not really know them.
But Mary's struggle is not unique.
I feel a huge responsibility.
Peggy Dolane says she decided to get involved after hearing from many parents facing the same challenges.
You can't get a flu shot, go in a tanning booth, or get a tattoo without your parents' consent. But you can make life and death decisions.
Dolane is volunteering 40 hours a week on the issue, researching and lobbying the legislature to rewrite the law.
I was even told, but the best minds in the state had tried to address this issue and go work on something else.
The age of consent comes with good intentions. It empowers young people to make decisions about their own bodies. And Dolane says she's not trying to change that part of the law.
I kept hearing, well, what happens to abortion rights? Well, they're completely separate issues.
She's pushing to give parents more rights when it comes to mental health.
Every state in the nation has more rights for parents than we do.
For example, states like Oregon, California, and Hawaii all have low age of consent, but they still give parents more oversight to make decisions.
Right now, parents can take a child to treatment for an evaluation, but you can't find out anything.
The goal is not to promote involuntary treatments, but to make the process a more family-centered approach with a professional at the helm.
A set number of outpatient settings that would be a limit that a kid could have to go to.
Dolane says after years of talking about this, she feels like her voice is finally being heard.
It was very clear, okay, we're at a turning point.
And that turning point is the momentum she is seeing in the legislature. Dolane says more lawmakers are now interested in the issue and willing to brainstorm ways to find a good balance.
Well, I'm carrying a huge weight of people. I mean, people who have died. Families who I've talked to who are standing up and saying my child is suffering and I can't help them.
And if Mary's story is any consolation, she says pushing her daughter to get treatment saved her life.
She's alive and she's living and she's here and she's working her way like any 22-year-old through early adulthood, but she's doing great.
Her daughter did not want to go on camera, but Mary says her daughter encouraged her to do this interview, hoping it could save others in need. In Seattle, Hannah Kim, Q13 News.